Welcome back to Giggle and Grow, everyone. We have a different type of episode today. We have David Allen Tracy joining us, and I will let him kick it off and introduce himself.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys having me on. It's so fun already. We've been already trying to figure out the technological difficulties with our Wi-Fi and all the things, but here we are. I found you guys on Instagram and was like, these two girls are like good friends and they're super relaxed and they're having fun, which is ultimately what anyone wants, right? And I reached out and was like, hey, can I be on your podcast? And you're like, sure. So here we are.
Let's happen. Yeah.
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, a little bit about me. I'm married. I have four daughters, ages 6 to 14, and live in Florida. And basically, have a very weird kind of eclectic background. I was born in Wisconsin, but by age 5, we moved to Latin America. My parents did nonprofit work. I lived in Mexico and Guatemala and then Panama for 25 years. And basically grew up amongst indigenous tribes in the jungle. And so it was childhood, really fun adolescence. I traveled to over 40 countries doing nonprofit work in my teenage years and young adult years, and really just gleaned so much from having traveled, having seen and met so many amazing people from many different walks and backgrounds. And I'm also a 2-time cancer survivor. So I had cancer when I was 14 and also when I was 30. And when I had cancer when I was 30, I had 4 kids at that point. We were living in Hawaii. And I had been doing a lot of nonprofit work at that point and knew that I wanted a change because most of my nonprofit ideas were actually for-profit ideas, which is kind of funny because ultimately I wanted to make a difference. And a lot of the projects and ideas that I had required a lot of funding and needed to be sustained and so many other reasons. We do a lot of marketing, a lot of fundraising and so forth and marketing ourselves. But I basically learned a ton more going and doing it. I'm always learning and studying. I ended up hiring and recruiting around 12 individuals from all over the world I had met most of them in the nonprofit sector, and they became my team. My company, Northgate Marketing, within its first year, already had clients in over 25 states and 4 continents. We grew really quickly. We could do marketing in 9 languages. We were providing marketing for like a Swiss bank, for example, in Switzerland and Panama, and like a manufacturing company for clothing in China that wanted to export to Mexico, and so many random things like that. And I loved it. But the world of marketing is a lot of algorithms and SEO and analytics and Google. And I'm such a people person and I love people and I love engaging with people. My favorite moments in marketing was always the discovery meeting where I would get to know like the juicy details about their lives and like what makes their business tick and why they started it and why they get excited about what they do and why they wake up each morning and what are their dreams and aspirations and what are their challenges. As I would learn that stuff, then we would begin to create the branding narrative and the marketing strategy and the funnels for their business to the level where eventually, which I still have my marketing agency, but I have transitioned to becoming a full-time personal brand coach, which is a lot more hands-on with individuals, helping individuals market themselves authentically, effectively, and memorably, where so many people who, especially nowadays, with the digital marketing scape and with Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, podcasting, writing a book, being a keynote speaker, being on TV, whatever it is, even just a small business owner who's trying to go to networking groups or a chamber of commerce and doesn't know how to present themselves in the right light. There's a lot of challenges. And oftentimes what happens is we have these blind spots. We can't see the areas we can't see. And we oftentimes have a perception of ourselves, typically that's negative, usually. And so that usually there's a lot of insecurity that gets in the way and people don't feel confident and they don't know what element to highlight. And so we tend to overcompensate and oftentimes try to become something or project something that we're not in order to build trust, but it actually has the opposite effect. And so that's kind of what I do. It's a lot of consumer psychology, individual stuff. I'm actually in the process of getting certified as a behavioral consultant for corporations and getting certified in DISC, and other personality assessments as well. And it's really just trying to understand the way people are wired and they think, and what elements we try to project out in order for their desired target market to love them and see them, without them having to pretend, So
we both got our degree in psychology, so we can admire the, tenacity on going towards learning more about the psychology and how to attract people through psychology, because it really is about how you portray yourself and who you attract in your everyday life as well. So I really respect that you're getting more and more into the psych part of it. I love that.
I literally just had a conversation today with a coworker, and I was just talking about even the education system. It was crazy to me that I had to take college courses in high school in order to even learn anything about psychology. It's not something that we often get to learn about our healing, about ourselves, about how to handle trauma and all the things. We don't learn that until in our 20s after college, when we're just thrown into life and we're like, oh, wait, I feel this way, I feel that way, and where is this coming from? So it's very interesting, very cool.
Right.
But David, I have a really big question for you, actually. With your story, I'm very, very interested. You spoke a lot about nonprofit, and actually back in my college days, I worked for Ronald McDonald House, and so I worked with them for a few years. It was something that I really wanted to get into because I was really into working with kids with oncology. So with working in nonprofit and just all the amazing things you did within 40 different countries, what was something that maybe inspired you the most, or what did you learn out of that experience?
Wow. So that really, there's so many, because every time you travel and every community you go to and every volunteer you collaborate with to volunteer, or every conference you attend or whatever it is, you take away something. Yeah. I think though, I'm trying to think like what would be the biggest takeaway. The biggest takeaway I think I found is that we just don't know. We just don't know anything, frankly. We think we do. And then we travel and then we learn stuff what we never thought. We learn stuff about their community, about the culture. We learn about ourselves in a new light. I oftentimes, having worked in different businesses and corporate consulting and also in like the nonprofit space as well, we often tend to have this mindset, which is very top down when it comes to change. And we say, we're going to have a team building activity, and we try to force it to happen, or we try to create unity by, these forced ways. And the truth is like, just get some people volunteering and doing good in a community and working hard together, and they're going to like learn a lot about each other. And they're going to start to learn what matters, right? And so I think that it's just the hunger to learn, the hunger to grow, the hunger to be humble, to just be hungry to grow ultimately. I think that's one of the things.
We love the growth part of it too. And I think a lot of the times something that you had mentioned was going to another country and then having this almost reality check of my life is not what I thought it was, or maybe my life is way better than I thought it was. I think that that's really important for people because, again, I have actually never been to Europe. I've only ever been to Mexico and Canada. And I've even in those small journeys that I've been to, I've had reality checks in those places, And so I think you're very right in the sense that everybody should almost travel in a way to learn about themselves, not just to go have fun, but in return, you learn about yourself and how you fit in your own society and your own community.
100%. And the thing is that culture is always evolving, always changing. And even in Colorado, where you guys are at, like literally there's people from all over the world and all over the country living in that city. And literally like there's no such thing as the monoculture anymore. There used to be a time when there were these kind of isolated communities, but with globalization and with social media and with so many other things, we live in a world in which it's becoming easier yet harder because we share these common denominators. We share these common experiences where most people around the world will have watched the same movies now. Most people around the world will have a TikTok account or WhatsApp or Facebook. most people will share these common things, but oftentimes it's the unspoken things, the things that we take for granted that we just assume are normal, where the cultural differences actually happen. And for a season, I was the VP for DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the American Marketing Association of Iowa. I only did it for 1 year. One of the one
I'm
of
from
the,
Iowa, so
I lived in Iowa for 4 years
oh my
in Des
gosh.
Moines.
Okay,
That's
I'm a Hawkeye fan here, so we'll pretend you didn't say that.
I never got picked aside because I was like, I had way too many friends who liked both.
We'll let it go there.
What part of Iowa are you from?
Quad Cities area. I was from a small town, about 900 people. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. That's so cool. Yeah, we lived in Iowa for 4.5 years.
Oh my gosh.
So, in Northgate, my agency was started there.
Really
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, and we have family there. My wife's from the southwest corner of Minnesota, and
Okay.
so small town, 150 people, is where she grew up, and
Yeah.
so, but we
Yep.
met in Panama.
That's amazing. So she left too, you left there, and then you guys got to meet. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Iowa. Everyone that I know there, I'm like, you just got to go for a couple years. You can always come back home, but just go explore the world, do your thing, leave
yeah,
the cows and the horses back, the corn, all the things.
100%, 100%. It's a great state, but it is nice to, especially during the winter, to get out.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I've heard about your all's winters.
Yeah, they're interesting.
They are, because sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not, and sometimes they hit you without we're like, where's the weatherman, like completely sleeping, not paying attention because it just snowed.
Overnight, yes.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So yeah, basically with the AMA, the American Marketing Association of Iowa, one of the things I said, if I'm taking on that role, was ultimately DEI is about understanding people, but beyond understanding people, it's about loving people. It's about valuing them. And so we can never make change in society or in the business realm or in any arena that we do, speaking in such a way that's top down and says, this is the way it is. It has to be an integration. And if we want to change society, we have to treat it like culture. And in science with bacteria culture, like I recently completed a fermentation course through Harvard because I was super fascinated with this. And it was like, you want to make some yogurt, you need to have the right culture for it. And you put it into the right temperature with the milk and you got yogurt, the next day. So it's all about understanding culture, but valuing it and then creating the right environment for it to thrive, but also to change, because as you add things, cultures change. And so one of my things when it comes to marketing, when it comes to personal branding, is what is your culture? What is the culture that your company has? What's the culture your podcast has? Giggle and Grow has a culture. It's a combination of both of you together, but it's also the two of you together along with the culture of your listeners, the things that your listeners and those who are watching gravitate towards. What is magnetizing them to you? It ultimately comes down to your culture. And not everybody's going to love every culture or feel like they feel at home, but there's a lot of people who will. And it's all about creating the right space and the environment for that to take off. And so there's a little bit of that science behind it and a little bit of the, consumer psychology. And I'm talking to two psychology people here. So literally you guys understand.
No, that's really, really interesting too. I mean, I don't know if this fully relates, but I always say within business and in marketing and just doing all of that, not a lot of times people don't see where you began, right? They see when you have the 200, 300, 1 million followers, but it really all goes back down to that culture that you build right from the beginning, those people that gravitate you towards day one and stay with you to that million followers, right?
Yep.
So, yeah. No, I totally agree with that.
Yeah. Well, I have another question for you, David. So one last personal question, and then we'll dive more into the personal brand coach question. For you, I know you had mentioned that you are a cancer survivor of 2 times, and a lot of what we talk about here on Giggle and Grow is mindset and how to get out of a negative mindset, how to stay in a positive mindset, and how to, just be kind to yourself when you're maybe in a negative mindset. So my question is, how was your mindset through that? And how did you get out of the negative because I can only imagine with all that's out there surrounding, even the word cancer, it's such a negative connotation. How did you manage your mindset through that whole experience, through the first one and your second one?
Yeah, well, they're both very different experiences. In part,
Sure.
when I was 14, you're already going through so much change, right?
Mhm.
Puberty and all the things and life and school and, and it's kind of crazy. And then I had cancer, and it was a really aggressive cancer that required a very aggressive kind of chemo. They called it the red pill of death. That's how much the chemo was not good for my body. So I was very, very sick for about 9 months, especially 9 months during the chemo time. I weighed nothing. Like, I was skin and bones, really sick, couldn't keep food down, couldn't go to school, was laying in bed all day when we weren't at the hospital, which we were at the hospital almost every day, honestly, for something. And so it was the mindset thing. So I remember, for me, and again, when I'm sharing what I'm sharing, this is my personal experience, and so just know that I'm, for all those who are watching and listening. But for me, I found out I had cancer because I knew something was wrong. I had a mass in my groin area, and I was really struggling. Okay, and I was like 14. I didn't know what to do. Didn't know if I should tell anybody. And I actually woke up from sleep one evening, and I felt as if God had said to me, David, you have cancer, like, outright. And I woke up like, okay. And he's like, go tell your parents now, and you're going to be okay. And you're going to go through a hard time. So I had this like revelation, right?
Yeah, I
Okay.
kind of huge. That's
Yeah.
talk
And
about.
so what happened was, that evening, then I went and told my dad. I was super embarrassed about it, and kind of scared. And my dad goes, okay, thanks for telling me. Let's go to see the doctor. We made an appointment, and it took a couple weeks between testing and finally doing the surgery and then doing the biopsy. And sure enough, the type of cancer I had was so aggressive that if I had waited even a week or two longer, it would have spread pretty badly. And so the timing was really precise. The
Wow.
other thing that happened was, of course, I was devastated. I remember sobbing and sobbing and sobbing, because cancer is scary. And number two, I was a freshman in high school, and you're just kind of like getting your life in order. Like, I finally figured it out. I'm not being made fun of in school anymore. Blah blah. And you kind of know who your friends are, and all the things. But then that happened, and life completely changes. And I think at a young age, suddenly I was faced with this reality that I could die. Like, I could. In fact, when I was going through chemo, there was a little boy named Oliver who did die. He was 5 while going through chemo. He had a brain tumor, and he would sit in my lap, and he would receive his chemo, and he was blind, and he ended up dying. And so when I was 14, it just hit me like, this is heavy. And so, from a mindset standpoint, number one, when I had gotten that, when God had spoken to me and said, hey, you have cancer, and it's going to be a hard time, but you're going to be okay, and I'm going to use this in your life, that gave me an assurance that I knew that I was going to be okay, number one. Number two, when I had gotten the surgery, I had an allergic reaction to one of the medications just after the surgery, and I started convulsing, like badly convulsing, like a fish out of water. I couldn't stop. I was convulsing for almost 2 hours. I didn't know what to do, and doctors didn't know what to do. And finally, a doctor, a friend of my parents, who was going through a training at the nonprofit, called my dad and says, "I think it's this he needs to be given Benadryl. It's an allergic reaction and intolerance to this medication." And suddenly I'm zapped with this Benadryl, and I'm like zonked out. But during that 2 hour time, I'm panicking. Like, I can't control my arms. I can't control my legs. I'm freaking out, and my parents didn't know what to do. The doctors didn't know what to do. The nurses didn't know what to do. This is in Panama, mind you. We didn't go to the States. So, like, I remember in that moment crying out to God and saying, I need help. I can't do this. Like, I literally can't do this. Like, this is too much. And in that moment, I'm desperate. I'm worn out. My body is shutting down. Like, it's just flying like crazy. And I remember crying out, because when you're that desperate, you can't, and you lose complete control. I lost complete control of my body, which was a very abnormal thing. This was a very rare thing to happen. And it was an intolerance to a medication called metoclopramide. And like, one in like 40,000 people can possibly get this. So, like, I lose control of my body. I'm convulsing, and I cry out, and I'm like, I need help, God. I can't do this. And in that moment, there was this peace that washed over me. And I kid you not, like I felt so much joy, despite the fact that I was convulsing, so much joy and so much like this inner like peace that never left the entire 9 months of going through chemo. Even though those were the hardest 9 months of my life at the time,
Yeah.
they were also, I kid you not, some of the happiest, most joyful times in my life. I was like smiling all the time, to the level where the psychologist at the hospital was like, what's different about you? Why are you like so happy? Can you share this with other kids and with the parents? And I remember just encouraging nurses and encouraging like so many people, because I was like feeling this overflow of joy where I was just happy and joyful, and it gave me so much strength and I kid you not, the chemo ended, and a couple weeks later, like when it was like officially done, it went away. Like, not to say I was unhappy all of a sudden, but it was like that inner strength and that inner peace and the inner joy I felt sustained me during those hard times.
Oh, yeah.
And everybody's story is different. And again, that's why I say this is my story, because I don't want to make people feel like, well, he's like talking to God over there and like this is happening. But you get my point. It is literally one of these things that just shook me to the core, and I realized, whoa, like I've been given a gift here. Number one, cancer was a gift for me. It wasn't a curse, it was a gift, because it strengthened me and matured me to such a degree that I never took my life for granted again. I know that every day is precious. I know that I'm allotted I don't know how many days I have to live, and none of us do. But what are we doing? Is our life are we living our life as if it's consequential or non-consequential? Are we looking to make a difference and leave behind a legacy? Are we going to sit around watching Netflix all day long when we have free time? Or are we going to try to create something that's going to make society better? Are we going to tap into all the gifts and abilities we have in order to maximize them and live life to the fullest, or not? Like, you have a choice. Like, we all have choices. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I took away from the first time of cancer.
That's incredible. Yeah, no, that's really incredible. Everybody has their own story, and we have always like talked about God and how he has such a big part in like us meeting and like our friendship, and it's kind of incredible that you were able to feel that and go through that. And in my opinion, hearing that, it's like that he was with you. That was 100% like an act of God in my eyes. I think everybody's going to view it in a different way and like see it in a different way, but I really appreciate you sharing that story with us.
And I do have a kind of a question off that too, with such an inspiring story. I know for me and myself, you know, I love to spread sunshine. I love to spread smiles. That is, I really want to reach a lot of people and help them find their inner light, inner work. And for you, you had mentioned how you kind of received this gift from God, right? And after the fact, you kind of felt that light go away. How did you know that you received a gift? When did you decide that you were going to take the gift that you were given and flourish with your career and go off and, you know, be you?
That's, a really good question. And I think that for me, just the fact that I was alive and kicking still. And again, I was sick for about 5 years afterwards, you know, because chemo does wreak havoc on my body. To this day, I still have issues because of it. But I think what it did was I knew, first of all, because God had spoken to me before I had the cancer, and then secondly, sustained me through it, that I was like, wow, I'm alive. And I remember just being very aggressive and pursuing all kinds. I've done so much already in my life. I've done so many different types of things, and to where it's hard to explain it, but it's almost like because you almost face death, suddenly death isn't scary anymore, and you're just like, let's live, right? So
that makes sense, though. That makes a lot of sense in itself.
Yeah. And so in that case, it's like, okay, so then what are the things that are going to have long-lasting value, the eternal value things, the things that are beyond me, the things that my children, my daughters are going to live off of, and that those around me. I think we don't often think about that. We live in such a quick fix buffet, I want an instant gratification kind of world, right? And I'm stressed, I'm depressed, I'm angry. I'm going to watch a reel. or a series of reels. I'm going to sit there and for an hour and a half, and I'm not bashing people. I do the same thing. I've done it so many times, right? But think about it. Like, this is such a new thing for our world to have access to, that at any given point, if I want to numb how I really feel and what's really going on, or distract myself from reality, I can do this. Okay? Like, and I could do it all day long. And so we lose sight of our relationships, friendships with our loved ones, with our kids, with our spouse. We lose sight on so many things we miss out on because of just this. Now, and I'm a marketing guy. I should love this because this is exactly where all this stuff happens, right? But I have a love-hate relationship with this. I love it in that I get to meet people like you guys. And I've challenged people so often when it comes to social media, as an example, to treat it as social media.
Yeah.
We oftentimes look at the media side of it, but not the social side of it, where we can actually meet people. And I can't tell you, I've met hundreds of people on social media that I've reached out to and said, hey, I'd love to have you speak at a workshop I'm doing virtually. Or, hey, can I be on your podcast like I just did with you guys? And here we are, we're doing it. It's a social, and I'm one of these people. I love staying in touch with people and engaging. And I've met people online who now I get to meet them in person in different places. I've connected, for example, one of the people I've met, who is a breathwork practitioner. I had her connect with from Iowa, connect her with a breathwork practitioner I met on Instagram in Canada. And now they're doing a collab. Like, cool. So we have to remember that people are valuable. Okay. People are valuable. And I think that more and more, there are so many efforts to dehumanize people, and I'm not just talking in the big ways, it's in the small ways. We need to learn to love people again. And I think that what I do from a personal branding standpoint, I'm certified as a theta healing practitioner as well. I help people overcome trauma, and I want people to learn to love themselves, because if they can't love themselves, they can't effectively love or receive love from others. I want them to be able to receive love from God. So I often tell people we need to go, and healing goes inward, it goes outward, and it goes upward. It's all three ways. Okay. So it has to, because we are body, mind, and spirit. And we are neglecting our minds a lot of times. We're neglecting our spirits. We're neglecting our bodies. We neglect ourselves so much, and we think we're feeding ourselves, but we're actually not. We're feeding ourselves trash a lot of the times. And so getting back to relationships, so important. And so that's probably another thing that I really valued, in the nonprofit world and in business and in having cancer, are that so many relationships that I've had over the years, people I've met in my childhood who were there for me, or when I had cancer, who, long story short, one of the people who directly contributed to me when I had cancer helped us financially, because it was expensive. And so was one of the VPs for like Toyota in Panama, and he helped us financially. And then later on, when I started my marketing agency, first of all, he's the one who told me I should become an entrepreneur. And then he hired us to do marketing. It's just like, what? All these years sticks with us, right? And so you just never know who you're going to meet and where it will go. And so that's one of the things that I've gleaned, I think, as well.
I love that. And I know you spoke about boundaries and how to kind of separate social from media. How, with all the work that you do and the healing and the self-work and all that, how do you continuously practice your own self-work throughout that?
I was really bad at that for a long time. Really bad at it. And in part, like, really bad.
We struggle with that too. I'm always like, let's practice what we preach. And a lot of why we do what we do is to motivate ourselves to do it. So a lot of us, that's why we do it.
Yeah.
No, I hear you. And sometimes I'll watch something I say on a reel or something. I'm like, I ought to apply that advice, and I have now. I don't say anything anymore that I don't do. Let's put it that way. But I'm still imperfect in how I do it. There's always new levels of learning, and there's new phases and new seasons to where what was working for you for a season doesn't work anymore. So you have to learn to adapt. But I think for me, it was a lot of it with my trauma work that I was going through. Like, the trauma for me wasn't going through cancer. That wasn't traumatic in the sense of trauma is like something happens to you that devastates you at the core and you can't get over it. And trauma can't be defined. Trauma is trauma for whoever, I can't say this is more important or more traumatic than the other, right? So, but for me, I had been through some traumatic stuff as a child, and I won't go into all the details on here because of the story, but you guys can insert your own trauma as a child if you're listening and watching, and think about how devastating it was for you and how it still impacts daily decisions that you make, right?
Oh, it still
So,
impacts you today.
Yeah.
It's still there. The trauma, so
Say it.
familiar.
Gotta recognize it and say hello. You don't
Hello.
Right?
Like a little parrot, like, it just knows, right? And so for me, the biggest thing I had to learn to do was to acknowledge it was there. I was taught, it was an unspoken teaching, or it was just actually taught to deny it or to not acknowledge it. And I think most people do that.
I think that's a social thing. That's
Yeah, I
something
think
that
that's-
comes, in my opinion, from our society.
Yeah.
And again, this is a big contender of it. Having the phone is a good way of being able to deny it and make it seem unreal.
Absolutely, 100%. And so we have all these coping mechanisms we put around us. We hide it away, and we tend to cope by denial. We cope through pretending it didn't happen, by trying to hide from it. There's superiority, inferiority, addiction, so much denial. There's so many different facets to how we do it. We almost all operate in some shape or form. But for me, I kept hiding my trauma by keeping really, really busy, by working really hard, and especially in humanitarian work, nonprofit work. It was kind of my security blanket. As long as I'm helping other people, I'm okay. But meanwhile, I was dying inside, literally, because I would work myself so badly that I would end up in the hospital, worn out, fatigued. My immune system would shut down. And this happened at least half a dozen times, okay, throughout my young adult and adult life. And it was becoming a problem, especially when I had kids, especially married, to where I can't afford to shut down anymore. I can't afford to hide away at work. I have little precious lives to take care of. So I had to do the work, number one. And I did. I went through a lot of different modalities of inner healing with different individuals. I'm still in that process. I'll be completely transparent. I don't think we ever get to the point where we're like, I'm great now. No, there's always stuff.
Onions done peeling.
I totally agree. I even say, I heard this thing one time from someone else, and they said, even if your life feels like the most perfect time of your life that you've ever had, going to therapy, I mean, there's so many things that you discover and you work through even throughout that time that you begin to start healing from. You don't even know you need it at that point, and you learn to love yourself even more from that. So,
oh yeah.
100%. And it's a journey. And the thing is that we have no control over our circumstances. We think we do, we don't. Things happen. COVID happened. No one knew it was coming. And it changed our realities like crazy. We just don't know. Right. And there can be triggers that we didn't even know were triggers. So we tend to layer it up and try to cover it up. And oftentimes if we have trauma, there's other traumas that layer on top of that as well. And the more we peel away the layers, the more aware we are of the other traumas we didn't even know were traumatic, because we're giving it a place. And so I decided as a personal brand coach to become certified in theta healing, because I wanted to help people, because I realized that for so many people, if you're trying to live authentically and compellingly with a personal brand, you can't if you're dealing with trauma. Because what's going to be, you might be trying to do this, but that trauma is getting here and it's blocking you from being effective.
Oh yeah.
And so I include it as a facet of what I do. I'm kind of like a Swiss Army knife. What tool do we need to pull out? If people want it, we can go there. And most often people do choose to do so. And what's amazing is that when we do that, it's incredible how often their career has more clarity and more focus and so forth. So healing trauma takes time. It's an ongoing process. It's a lifestyle to heal. We should constantly be walking in healing. It's not something, I don't believe that we walk healed per se. I believe we can have areas where we are healed from traumas, but the healing journey is a healing journey. It is constantly flowing so that we're keeping things in check. So one of the things I do, amongst many things, but the things that you've asked, like, what do you do to keep things, where you are? And is every morning now, non-negotiable, I go to the gym or I go for a walk or I go for a run. It's an hour and a half consistently every morning.
I love
Uh,
that.
every morning. And that is, I'll tell you right now, that is not me. That is not true to the way I am naturally wired. True to naturally wired, I want to sleep in. I want to be, or working right away on my computer, on my phone, immediately upon waking up. I want to be on my computer and working, right? So, but I began to do that. And what I found was that it gave me time to process even the walking motion, left, right, left, right. There's this component in the brain and of just processing and assimilating information in our subconscious level that begins to unlock and unleash, and we're able to really bring the subconscious to the conscious mind and begin to focus on the things that are in the back end. So that is very helpful for me, very helpful for me. The theta healing approach is really, there's different brain waves. There's beta, gamma, theta, alpha. Theta is the state that we're in when we're kind of zoning out. So it can be like when you're waking up from sleep, but you're aware that you're sleeping, but you're kind of aware that you're awake, or you're falling asleep. You're thinking about your to-do list, but you're also drifting into dream world. You're aware that you're falling asleep, or when you're on a long drive home from work and you don't even remember how you got home, but you know you got home.
It's a little frightening sometimes.
Yeah. Or it can be when you're on a long walk and you're maybe listening to music and you just zone out. What happens in those moments is that the theta brain waves are more active. So we're not sleeping, we're not out, but our that's where the subconscious mind dwells. And that's where, like, even right now, as I'm talking with you guys, my conscious mind is completely enveloped and involved in this conversation. The back of my mind is thinking about dinner I just had. It's thinking about my that tomorrow morning I have a meeting I need to remember. But further beyond that, as I'm sharing stories, I'm remembering little nuances. I'm thinking about, oh yeah, when I was in Panama, this happened, and Oliver was blind, and I'm thinking about the color of shirt he was wearing, and oh, that nurse, and who was really cool, and she would always made me laugh, and the brain goes in millions of directions, right? And so the thing is that when we are in an intentional place guided to heal trauma, and we're allowing that people I'm working with to be in that calm theta state as we're processing grief and trauma, is we allow the brain on the subconscious level to take the steering wheel as opposed to the conscious level, which makes excuses for the trauma. It says, oh, it's not that bad. Yeah, I understand why my mom did that, but or my dad wasn't that bad, or it was really my fault, or whatever the excuse is. We allow the subconscious mind to take over and point it out as it was, which is a long process, which I don't have time to explain all of it here, but it's really fun. As weird as that sounds, people, like, it sounds weird to say it's really fun to navigate trauma. It is, because it's not as scary as what people think it is. We need to be gentle with our body, minds, and spirits. We just need to be. And what I tell people is our trauma is like precious pearls. It's something that's aggravated, it hurts, it's like sand, and then it gets enveloped and coated in this pearly thing, and it's a precious thing. So trauma, when healed, is also a gift, because whenever trauma is healed,
it's a release. Like,
yeah,
you know how you said it wasn't scary? It's like when you go through processing trauma, it's like this huge release, and that's what makes it almost, quote unquote, in my opinion, fun. Because, and like for me, I kind of got not addicted, but I became like, fell in love with the release of the trauma and being able to continue to do that, and which is a big part of why I love doing this podcast, is because I can, encourage other people on how to find that release. And because when you find that release, you can, just continue to grow as a human.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I know for me, and walking through trauma myself, I know every time that I finally find that answer, that thing I was once looking for, it does feel like this whole, I mean, like, you keep saying, the
weight
release,
off your chest. It's like a deep breath from God.
It is. It is. And the perspective you get is no longer the subjective perspective, it's an objective.
I know for me too, over the last couple of years, I thought, back in the day, people pleasing is something I've been learning, walking through. And I actually thought, for a while, I thought it was my gift from God. I being able to empathize with everyone, be able to understand everyone on a deeper level, loving that side of me. But realizing, like you said, it left me feeling empty. I wasn't filling up my own bucket. And at first, I didn't realize that was coming from trauma and a place from way in the past, right? But once I really noticed that, I realized I didn't have to stop empathizing with people, but I can really focus on myself while still being able to do that. And it was that answer. It was that answer I didn't know I needed.
100%.
Yeah.
It's so good because we have been given gifts and talents and abilities, and they just because we did it as a way to buffer or protect ourselves for a long time does not mean that it's invalid.
Yeah.
And so we have a natural propensity towards something. The difference is, do we have to carry the trauma while doing it or not?
Right.
Exactly.
Well, I think those are all of our questions for you. I know you have a few prepared for us, so we are totally open to answering some of yours.
Yeah. So I think first of all, I would like to know why you guys decided to start a podcast.
That's such a great question. So I had been wanting to do a podcast for a long, long time. And I tried in college by myself and it felt super overwhelming. And then I met Morgan, I don't even know how long ago, like a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with her positivity. I felt really connected to that. And I thought, I'm going to pitch my idea to her. I'm going to bring it to her and I'm going to ask her if she'll be a part of it and join with me. And I got very blessed with a great co-host. And so I don't feel as overwhelmed like I'm doing everything alone. I have like what I like to call Morgan is the creative side, the very good drawer, and I'm the business side.
Yeah.
Very good. She designs everything. She really helps with a lot of that, and I do a lot of the business editing, and she does a lot of the managing of the social media. And so it really helped me feel like, okay, this is possible when I had somebody, especially somebody who shares the same beliefs as me and has the same values. That was really, really big for me. I'll let you speak to it.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, I'll be honest with you. My husband worked with Courtney, and that's how they met, and then I got to meet them through each other. But I remember Sam, my husband, coming home one day from work, was like, I met this girl, Courtney Morgan. She reminds me so much of you, and the way just how much you want to chase your dreams and go after big things. And I know he mentioned you started a clothing business or some sort back in college. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I want to do. And it took me a while before we really truly connected. I actually quit my job as a recruiter. My husband and I, right after we got married, we went and traveled Italy and Greece for about 6 weeks, came back home to the US, and we traveled for another 4 weeks, kind of back between our families. And by the time I got back to Colorado, I was like, there's no way I'm going to be a recruiter. I'm not going to go back to sitting behind my desk for 8 hours a day. I'm going to go chase after my dreams. And I was terrified, absolutely terrified, but I started my own Most Miles business. We work with Etsy, really all focused on positivity and kind of, again, spreading that light. But then Courtney, of course, inspired me with the podcast, and I was like, let's do something else. And being able to do that with a friend, someone that I also valued and looked up to, someone that really taught me a lot about my own positivity and self-growth. There was no doubt about it. We had to go for it. So I can tell you, we had no idea what the heck we were doing.
We had no idea.
But that's the fun of it, though. So and now we get to meet, of course, an amazing person like you and get to hear your stories. So I think God had a plan, and he's leading us through it.
100%. I can see that in you both. I mean, you guys look like you guys have known each other for more than a year and a half. And so, like, I thought, oh, these girls must have been in high school together, like.
That's how we feel like. We're like, just you meet somebody and you're just like, wow, like, our values and where we want to go in life, they just align, and we're in the same place as life. And we always talk, we're like, we might not always be here and this might not always be our path, but we know that like this is part of our path and part of our journey, and this is where we want to be. And so I'm speaking for both of us, but that's kind of how I interpret both of how we feel. So
love that. Well, my next question is, what do you want to accomplish with your podcast?
I'll let you answer first. I think we've been over this, but I'll let you.
I think really just being able, I think we've said this on this podcast here so far. I think it's really being able to inspire others. I think so often society, we're always comparing ourselves to one another, where it's easy to say, oh, he's doing this, or Morgan's doing that, or my best friend, 2 years ago is now doing this. We don't often see the in between. And so really being able to offer that community for others to be able to connect and want to grow and to be able to discover who they are while having people beside them that are going to be there with them. And it's not, again, about the comparing to one another, but it's about growing together and really finding that love and that laughter throughout that. Of course, life isn't easy. We're going to have ups and downs all the time. But again, I think it's important to have those people next to you that you can trust.
Yeah. And the authenticity of it too. I think being able to, I think you're talking about like vibrations and things like that. And I'm a big believer that authenticity is the highest vibration that you can actually be at. And I think that's a big piece of what we try to help people figure out and find is their authenticity. And that is what I really want for other people, because a lot of the times I feel like we're talking to our younger selves and we're not that, we're not super old or anything, but we're also like, hey, it's good to talk to our younger selves. And it's also good to talk to people who might be older than us and just listen to us and just give some type of, word of authenticity. That's my big.
And I definitely will kind of go off that a little bit too, just in the past here. But for me, I mean, I started out college. I thought I was going to be a PA, physician assistant, going and working with kids with oncology. I quickly found out that Gen Chem wasn't too for me, and not to say the least, I don't like blood, so to be a doctor is kind of insane. But I knew that I really, really wanted to be alongside those individuals that had to go through something like that. And I was led to a child life specialist. I of course, didn't want to go through that many years of school. They don't make the best salary. They deserve way, way more for what they do there. But and that's what really led me to psychology. I thought I would go and get my master's in psychology, and that's really what I thought I would be doing, especially with kids. But I think as I went through college and again started noticing my own trauma and burning out and trying to have this really busy life while being social and having great friends, etc., I knew I wanted to work with more individuals in the 20s, even 30s, although I wasn't there. I just, again, like we spoke earlier on the podcast, I think it's so easy to kind of lose sight of who we are, what we are. We know what we lived through, but we don't know how to handle it after the fact. And so being able to be alongside of that with them, connecting with others, really empathizing with them and helping them.
And putting it out there for people to like, they can look at our content whenever they want to. And if they're having a bad day, they can listen to it and hopefully find something that they're like, oh, I didn't even think about that. I didn't know I could do that. That's why we like to do a lot of tips and tricks on how to figure out like your best self or how to grow as a person. And again, like that's a big part of it, as I think, is putting out the positivity to hope that people can at least get something from it, right? If it's not our entire episode, it's a 5-second clip on, our reels that makes them laugh, right? And so,
Yes, 100%. I love that. That's so good. Really inspiring. And you can tell that you're mission driven, which is great for any type of entity, business, movement, podcast, you name it. You have good culture and and you're mission oriented and you got good synergy between the two of you where you're balancing each other out. So that's awesome. Now, on a completely unrelated note, my last question is for each of you. Okay. If you could pick anywhere in the world right now that you want to visit and what you would want to do in that place specifically.
So that's such a good question.
Mine's weird. Well, it's not weird. I would totally go to Ireland and I'd actually want to go to church. I know that's really different, but I grew up Catholic, and although I'm not, I would say, a hardcore Catholic anymore, the roots of Catholicism is in Ireland, and I would want to go to a very old 100-year-old church and just like see how it is there. I just think that would be very, very interesting.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So cool.
I know that's.
I was like, that's a really good one.
Yes.
Honestly, okay, I haven't quite figured out what I would do there yet. I don't know if I can answer that step, but when we were traveling in Italy last year, we did a cooking class. I met a girl from the Philippines, and we met two girls from, or a guy and a girl from Japan. And so we of course were discussing with them how weddings were like in the US versus what weddings were like out there. I know for us, of course, it's all about the couple, and we're having a big party celebration, right? Inviting all the friends and family. And I quickly discovered that in Japan, I believe it was, that they don't do it that way. A lot of what they do is it's more focused on the parents and the parents allowing this marriage, and it's not big party for them, but it's more for the family. And so this girl that we had spoken to, she was like, I just really want to go to the US. I want to have a wedding of my dreams out there. And so it made me actually want to really go to Japan and understand their culture a little bit more, knowing that it would be completely out of my comfort zone. Italy was out of my comfort zone enough already, but there I think it would just push me a little bit more. And it's a culture that I honestly have never discovered. So that like I said, I don't have a second answer or a second part to the question, but I can definitely tell you that.
Well, both of those sound really awesome. Yeah. Honestly, awesome. Yeah, I've not been to Ireland yet, but I've been to Scotland and Northern Ireland in England, and we went to a couple of old churches there, and it is exactly what you're feeling is what it's like. It's worth doing.
Yeah,
I definitely. And I've not been to Italy. Goodness sakes, I love Italian food and I love cooking. I don't know if I mentioned this, but back in the day, I went to culinary school, so I'm a certified chef, and I love cooking and travel cooking. And of course, Italy is like number one, like places on the list. But both of those sound really cool.
Gained, I think, like 25 pounds. No joke, like 25 pounds. But I'll tell you, you feel great though. It's not like US where you're bloated and feel like crap. I mean, you really can't eat if you go to do that whole time.
That's all that non-GMO healthy wheat that they use in their pasta there. It's not like all chemically processed.
In our cooking class, I think it was 3 ingredients that we made our gnocchi and then our pasta with. It was it was good. You got to go there. I recommend Amalfi Coast. That's kind of where we spent our month. Staying in a really cool town. I always say it wrong, but I believe it's Agerola. It sits right on the top of Amalfi Coast. It's cool because you can kind of hop around to all the different areas and not just in that touristy spot. But yeah, very, very cool. Highly recommend if you get a chance to.
Oh, for sure. You know it. 100%.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, David. This was so much fun. We had a blast with you, and we appreciate your stories that you were able to tell us, and we really appreciate it.
Honestly, your stories are really, really inspiring. Don't stop sharing them. So many people are going to be changed because of you if they haven't already. Keep going on, and I would, of course, I would love to personally learn more from you too. So hopefully we can chat again.
Yeah.
We will. We'll stay in touch. We'll treat social media like social media.
Awesome. Well, have a good night, David. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.